if you have any questions, I would be happy to. I'd be happy to ask. We actually have a couple of questions here, and one of them is, how do you typically fund a buyout among shareholders? A few of the scenarios, or most of the scenarios that I've worked in are situations where mom and dad are selling to siblings, and they are typically funded by mom and dad financing the purchase over a very long period of time. So when we go back to the earlier scenario of control by an active parent, they may be out of the business for a long time, but they still have a financial interest because they finance my purchase and I'm paying them out over 10 or 15 or 20 years, and typically out of profits. So in that type of scenario, adequate security has to be in place to protect the seller, in that situation mom and dad. But of course, there are other funding mechanisms. You can go to banks, other family members, spouses. So it really runs the gamut as to how a buyout may be funded. There's another question. Reads, in a situation where kids are buying out mom and dad, how is that typically dealt with? Well, I think it sort of runs into the last question that I asked about how do you typically fund buyouts. Certainly, if children are financially capable and can afford to pay mom and dad out, well, I guess that's the simplest way for mom and dad. And whether or not kids have the resources to do that, well, that's great. In the situation where they don't, as I mentioned above, where they don't have the financing, well then I suppose the situation is mom and dad will do a long-term or some type of financing to accommodate that. Another question's come in. It says, in the scenario where I am a 76% shareholder and the family trust is a 24% shareholder, how do we go about deciding on voting, deciding if we want to sell shares to an employee? Well, I think it falls back to the philosophy of your business to start with. It will also depend on the makeup of the beneficiaries of the family trust. But if you're if you are the shareholder that owns 76% of the shares of the family business, well, you're in charge. Now, whether you want to sell shares to an employee or not, that'll depend on a whole variety of factors, and really whether it's a family business or not, it doesn't really have that much of an impact on it. But I've been involved in situations where there's a shareholder agreement, or there are family rules, or there's an understanding involved where no non-family members can be shareholders. So if that were the scenario, then in order to get shares into an employee's hand, you would definitely have to get buy-in and agreement by, in your scenario, the family trust, if you were in agreement with that. All right. Another question is, have we come across a situation where siblings would not agree to enter the business if other siblings are involved? Well, I guess I have come across that situation in one occasion, and in that scenario, what happened was parents were in discussions with their son to acquire ownership of the business, buy it outright from them. They were pretty far down the process of the agreement. At that point, sister comes along and says, well, hang on a second, why can't I become an owner of the business as well? In that scenario, brother said, well, if sister's involved, I'm not. And unfortunately, what happened was the sister got frozen out. No pun intended. Another question's come in that asks if we have a template for family shareholder agreements that we could review. Well, I do. I have I guess what's even better is a checklist that we can send to you. And so if you, when this is over, if you want to email me or my trusty colleague Keith Gallup, who set this all up for us, you can send a request to me, and I can certainly send out a version of the checklist, and that gives you an idea, a very good idea of the many factors to consider, and far more comprehensive than I can go through in this 45-minute session. And the last question, I guess I spoke about it before, but is if shares are split evenly 50-50, what are the best ways to deal with a deadlock? I think the issue there goes back to the business philosophy. A lot of people in business, family business or not, say that if we don't agree on what we're going to do, then we shouldn't do it. But as I mentioned before, that can create stagnation and not advance the corporation, or the business rather. And so I think what you need to decide up front is what is the philosophy? And that brings us to the last question. Do I think family rules should form part of the shareholders agreement? Well, not all family businesses have family rules, and for those that aren't aware, family rules are really they're typically cobbled together by the family in the course of carrying on business. They're typically not anything formal, but I have family rules as a schedule of the shareholders agreements, and in some situations, one particular that I can call, the family is quite insistent on saying that where there's a disagreement to the shareholders agreement on the family rules, family have been working on for many years. Yes, if there are family rules, I think they can be formalized and can form a agreement. So I think I'm up to the end of our time. I would like to thank you all for attending. As I mentioned, if you're interested in getting a copy of the checklist, I'd be more than happy to send that out. You can email me. My email address is on the screen. Certainly, if you have any questions or issues that come up, I'd be more than happy to help out. And it was a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you very much.